think that there's redevelopment's only happening in greater downtown Detroit. We are very far removed from greater downtown, and some very cool things are happening out here in this neighborhood. But anyways, so we're going to hit the less vibrant area pretty soon. So we can talk about where Detroit was, where Detroit is today, and some of the things that happened to get Detroit to where we are today. So the peak of Detroit was 1955 in terms of population. We were just under 2 million people. So a lot of times people will erroneously point to the riots, which are actually technically a rebellion, not the riots of '67, as when Detroit started going downhill. But that's, again, erroneous. That the population of Detroit had been going down for 12 years prior to those happening. So why were people leaving in 1955? Was it because everybody hated Detroit then? No, Detroit was one of the best places in the world at the time. But in the 50s, old was bad and new was good. People didn't want the old stuff; they wanted new stuff. We could all move in suburbs and we live in houses that look all the same and things like that. And that was the cool thing to do. It sounds like I'm joking, but that was the idea. That was cool. But a lot of Detroit's problems and Metro Detroit's problems go back before that, back to a state law that was passed in 1909 called the Home Rule Act. So the Home Rule Act is all about villages and towns being autonomous in terms of incorporations by larger entities. So as Detroit was growing, it was not able to incorporate smaller towns unless the towns completely agreed. And of course some of them didn't because of the auto industry. So as New York was growing and Chicago was growing, they incorporated all these small towns, and Detroit just couldn't do that with some of the towns, and so it really stunted Detroit's growth. People always talk about Detroit as this massively large, unmanageably large place. And while Detroit is not a small town, it's not that big. We're the 65th largest city in the nation. So 65. There's 64 towns that are bigger than us. We're half the size of New York City and about 2/3 the size of Chicago. So if you're allowed to grow to the size of New York City, 40 of the surrounding suburbs would be part of the city of Detroit. So that Home Rule Act left all of Metro Detroit very fragmented. Metro Detroit is made up of 131 municipalities. And that does not lend itself very well to regionalism, because that's 131 mayors. That's 131 city councils. A lot of times those places are not sharing fire departments, they're not sharing police departments, they're not sharing school systems. If you look at a place like the Grosse Pointes, so most people, how many of you have heard of Grosse Pointes? Affluent neighborhood? So everybody thinks about Grosse Pointes as one place, but that's actually 5 different towns. That's 5 different places. And they don't even necessarily always get along with each other. These are people that have everything in the world in common. They're mostly, at least somewhat well off